ಕೆಲವು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ನೋಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ
Works as well. Thank you so very much, and thank you for a very patient audience. We're still at 1:59, so we did a tech check before 2 o'clock. All right.
Hi everyone, welcome to The Change is Yours. Ayesha Singh of Art Chain India, Poornima Sukumar and Sadhna Prasad from Aravani Art Projects, Kriti Sood of Learning Through Arts, Narrative and Discourse, and Shilo, Shiv, Suleman of Fearless Collective speak about the importance of peer-to-peer and independent support groups to realize their personal agency in creating spaces which has the power to bring about change. This conversation will be led and moderated by independent curator and arts educator Shaleen Wadhwana. So welcome.
Thank you, Ashna. Thank you so very much. Thank you, the dear audience today at 2 o'clock, choosing to be with us here. We will try and assume it's not because of the AC or the food. All right. My name is Shaleen Wadhwana, and I've curated the public art walks that you will hopefully be joining in after this talk. And I'm very glad you are all here with us today to hear this conversation I'm having with my friends and colleagues. I've had the absolute privilege of working with each of them in one and many capacities. So I welcome actually all of you all onto the stage. Ayesha, Poornima, Sadhna, and Kriti and Shilo, please. You all also can check your mics.
check.
Yeah. Just do those bits of checking or chagaram, both work. All right. So one of the ways in which we've tried to understand the last 2 years, which are part of the pandemic that we're still in, is to see where and how communities that try and create any manner of change within the arts ecosystem, how have they evolved, what is it that they do, and how is it that we're part of this change-making process. And change is a very big word. I think that we're all very humbled by the fact that the communities that we've all tried to create in this conversation have taught us more than we've taught them. I think that's a sentiment we all can agree with. Yeah. All right. As we go through the slides, we will flip the traditional bio introduction format into you all being able to understand what each of these persons have created by looking through the videos and the slides of each of their organizations. By the end of about 40 minutes, you'd be very familiar with the work that we all have done. And after that, we're open to any manner of questions directed to any of us. So one of my first questions actually with all of them was about how in peer-to-peer learning systems, in pro bono or volunteer-driven systems, how do we generate momentum, and most importantly, how do we keep maintaining it? Because a lot of what we do is driven by passion. So then it becomes extremely tricky to keep passion, motivation as something that is continuous. And how do we keep reformatting ways in which we can make sure our community thrives with us? So I request the first slide change. Yes, so Kriti Sood is here with me, and we're both extremely passionate about arts education. LAND was an organization that she started, and she'll tell us a little bit more about it, specifically about the aspects of generating and maintaining momentum when you come up with a community that's mostly pro bono, volunteer driven. How does leadership impact you in that aspect?
So just a bit about LAN to begin with. Actually, when I started LAN, it was in 2019, and then 2020 came. So it was like such a shift straight away. You know, you decide to do something, and then there's this big setup which happens. So art education has been something very close to my heart. Because usually when we think about art education, it's thought about in a very minimalistic manner, some creative project here or there. Let's do an intervention here or there, but it's never really thought about a process that can create immense impact and can create a generational thought-provoking narrative to be formated. So when land happened, the idea was that I wanted to go everywhere, from care homes to all the schools, to all the universities, to all the museums, to all the institutions, to understand how I can do this. But when I did go there, one could realize that education is there. In schools, you have education. Museums, you have your art projects going on. But where do we implement our art education project where it's not just one-off, but it's a continuous process? So for us, it's been a very difficult journey because first you have to prove yourself that there can be an impact created. Because for a lot of interventions, you already know, okay, fine, we've seen this here and we've seen this there. But for something like this, it is like schools, we are busy. We have all our subjects going on. You want to do an art class, just do it during hobby. Museum, it's also like, okay, we have this exhibition happening right now, so you want to do something related to art, so do it when the exhibition opening is happening, when we have people, right? But over here, we have like an immense responsibility of the impact that we're going to be creating, because we're entering someone's place, we're entering someone's childhood, and you cannot just enter and leave. You have to have that kind of responsibility. So I think for us to build that community has been, firstly, to respect our students the most. And each child matters. So not to leave anyone behind. So it shouldn't just be like, we can go to the schools which are going to be paying us a lot or something like that. It has to be gone to places where, create programs where we can create such curriculum, even in a remote corner of India. They can pick up our lesson plans. Get in touch with us. We can do some capacity building program with you. And there can be a thought through intervention in that context, but not just enter and leave. So I just feel like for us, it has been a bit of a struggle because education itself is a struggle in this country. So you can think about what art education would be. And yeah, so right now, what we're doing with land is truly, truly to research, understand, and have empathy when we're sharing. So that's what I want to share in the beginning.
Thank you so much, Kriti. And for those who are visiting us today, I'd like to highlight that one of the ways in which land is making impact at the India Art Fair is also that they have 3-day workshops. One of the more interesting ones is to work with educators to create modules. So that's one of the ways in which land also tries to do that work of not just having a one-cycle impact, but have a multitudinal impact as well. I request the next slide change for a video that talks about the Fearless Collective, and Shilo will explain a bit more after that. Just the volume as well, please.
As long as the sun and the moon exist in the sky, the name of our revolution shall exist. I learned this nara from a 6-year-old girl at Shaheen Bagh 2 years ago, during India Art Fair actually. How many of you made it out to the protests here? Were there a lot of people at the protests? It was an incredibly, incredibly powerful time. And what I learned to the protests wasn't just this nara, but I also learned that art wasn't something that was additive or outside of protest movements and resistance movements. Especially in South Asia, art kind of becomes into the spinal columns of these movements. Our independence movement was founded on the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore. Even Gandhi's Salt March is like a performance art piece in itself as well. So for me, what I realized was that art doesn't need to be outside. It needs to actually be speaking to the politics of the time. I started Fearless in 2012. And just to answer your question as well, for us, our work is less about creating our own momentum and actually aligning ourselves and contributing to people's movements by bringing art into the center of those conversations, and also then creating public monuments to the communities. While all of the graffiti has been wiped out from Shaheen Bagh, every single trace of that movement has disappeared. Our mural still exists as a testament to those women and to their resistance. So Fearless began in 2012. We can go on to the next slide. And where we've worked in over 40 countries across the world. Most recently, we were aligning with the people's movements in Sri Lanka as the ongoing economic crisis takes over. We can go on to the next slide. We've worked in Pakistan, in Liari. Go on to the next slide. In Tunisia with queer women in Tunisia. In Canada with indigenous people. And our work is really to turn up in moments of fear and to create monuments to beauty. What tends to happen, in a lot of our resistance movements as well is that there's so much anger, there's so much oppression that the anger and the violence also then takes over the imagery and the voice of those movements. And so what we try and do is to articulate what we love as much as we know what we hate. So Fearless really is a counterforce of beauty, of love in spaces of fear.
Thank you so much, Shilo. And for those who are keen, we also have the art district in the Lodi colony. So you'll also find Fearless there as well. And next slide, please. All right. I have with me the Aravani Art Project's representatives here. It is a collective that represents issues regarding cis women and trans women, and all the issues that need that level of voice and platform. So we're extremely grateful, one, for the mural that is there as you enter the gates. That is also made by the Aravani Art Project. I hand it over here for them to explain more. We can keep going on to the next couple of slides, please, as they speak.
So the space for transgender in the field of art has been pretty much non-existent until the recent past, and it was an act of rebellion, and it was also to make a point in a public space, because as we all know, a lot of cis women itself find it so hard to hang out in public spaces and have to have a reason why we are there. It felt even more like the need of the moment for the trans women to also be able to be able to reclaim these spaces in public. And the movement, Aravani Art Project started in 2016 as an experiment with the trans community in Bangalore. And Sadhna has been there since day one, and both of us have seen and been a part of how this entire collective grew organically and completely led by the trans women. We focus on trans women who are mostly into sex worker, mostly work in the sex working industry or work as within their community and their system. We want to create a space, or we are all creating a space together in public spaces, in the field of art, and now slowly exploring different forms of art, because I'd want all of them to get the exposure that we all have. I'm really feeling bad that none of them are present for the talk. They were here to paint the mural, and then it got really hot and they had to leave. But yes, I'd like to ask Sadhna.
Hello, is it on? It's on? Okay. Yeah. So I think my part largely in Aravani is to make sure that nobody is looking at the project as a pity project at all. I do not want anybody to look at our wall. I think it happened in the first year when somebody looked at the wall and went like, oh, it's trans women painting. So hence, the quality of the work, if it's a little mediocre, it's okay. Because primarily Poornima and me are artists, it is extremely exciting for me to prove to myself, for them to prove to themselves and to everybody that there is no mediocrity needed in what we create at all. We want to push the design and the art of what we do beyond what anybody has seen also. And it's not a pity project where we're just giving them an opportunity. They are artists first, and I think we talk about their gender pretty much after that. And that's really important in all the walls we've done.
And as a movement, we are constantly having new people in and out, because the collective is not very structured in the sense of how many people should be there. We are very conscious about how many people from the trans collective community are representing. But we are also a very moving collective, because wherever we go, we interact with the transgender people of that region, because it's important to understand the politics and the culture of that region. And you'll be amazed to know that a lot of, we collectively say it's the transgender community, and not looking at them as individuals. And every time we move from one state to another, we see the amount of differences, whether in language, of course, these are differences that we already know, but culturally and even like religiously, traditionally, politically, every state is different from the other, and so are the transgender people. So it's so important for us as a collective to make sure that we work and get to know the new politics of that space that we go to. And right now it's moving. It's 6 years now, and yes.
Thank you so much, Poornima and Sadhna. I think for us, what is a big learning is that up until now, we've heard about collectives at an international scale and a local scale. And the fact that you all are all able to kind of embed yourselves in the communities, and it's that energy that is represented and is representative of in your work, and that in and of itself is a certain level of authenticity that we crave. Kriti, again, you've kind of highlighted how government structures and the gaps that you're trying to fill in that. One of the ways I started this question with us was also to look at what are the ways in which organizational responsibility in pro bono or volunteer-led organizations can be maintained. I now head on to Ayesha Singh, who's going to talk a little bit more about the art chain. I myself review a lot of portfolios. I myself work a lot with emerging artists, so I do understand the massive gap we have. And the art chain has been one of the movements that has been uniquely successful in being able to bridge those gaps as well. So we have multiple types of gap in art education being filled. This is one other aspect I want to highlight for all of you with the art chain. Ayesha, go for it.
Hi, my name is Ayesha Singh. I'm an artist and here as a part of Team Art Chain India. The art chain exists as a space which is online, so as a website and an Instagram page that exist in three laterals. The first is Art Chain India, which is an alternative marketplace for artists and a free informational resource. The second is the review chain, which is for artists to get pre-application help. And the third is Art Chain Legal, for us as artists to know about our legal rights and its implementation. It was started by myself and a fellow artist named Purvai Rai during the lockdown in May 2020, when we realized that not only, no, it's good. I'll tell you when to switch the slides. Okay. When we realized that as an artist, even as an art student, so many times people fight with their families to be and go study art, or so many times they're not really supported or have the approval of their families to do so. So many artists have other day jobs, like as a teacher, or wait and look for grants and fellowships, especially for people with non-commercial practices, to get funding for the work that they do. But a lot of this completely halted during the lockdown. And so we were looking at ways in which that we could sort of provide monetary support to artists, but how can we do it in a way that it can generate and go beyond just the people that we know or the people in our sort of periphery who we engage with. So today we have, our team has evolved to a team of 6 people now, with Virangana, who's an independent curator, Radha, who's also an independent curator, Pranati, who works as an arts manager, Vatsala, who has just joined our team and is an artist, and Sitaram, who is an architect but makes our websites. We can go to the next slide. And we started off with the marketplace, but thinking of a hashtag as an idea as a marketplace. So initially we put out these rules of where artists could put up their work for 10,000 rupees, and if you sold 5 works, you sort of helped another fellow artist by buying another artist's work within the chain. So you can go to the next slide. This is the hashtag that exists. So it's hashtag ArtChainIndia, and there are 2 more now, which is hashtag ArtChainIndia2 and hashtag support ArtChainIndia. But thinking of creating a market online, Instagram really became into a valuable space or a space of meaning for us. Because the first day that we had put up our first post on Instagram, artists had started putting up work, and we realized this is a space that was needed. We kind of just jumped into it, and we were like, okay, if this works, it works. If it doesn't, we tried something. And the first work that was sold in a few hours. So after that, sales skyrocketed. In fact, they were going so fast. Today, there are over 16,000 artworks that have been posted by artists themselves. But here, the idea was that there's no subjectivity in terms that we're not a gallery or a foundation or tastemakers in that way that are going to tell artists that they can be a part of this or not. If you're an artist and you want to put your work up for sale, you just take the sort of caption format. You can take that from us or from the website, and you can put up your work for sale. Next slide, please. We also started getting 30 to 50 DMs a day at that time asking us similar questions, like what is an authenticity certificate? Can I send that with my work as a PDF? Can I email it to someone? Or what are editions? How do I speak about editions? And we realized that there were a few people who were asking us the same question. We could see the patterns, but there might be many more people who had the same questions who might not be asking us. So we started building posts with the same thing, how to create an invoice and so on. And it started to sort of build itself into a resource in that way. Next slide, please. Including things like a certificate of authenticity. We made these videos. We have it in English and Hindi as of now, but we've just got funding to expand it to other languages in India. Next slide, please. And so much so that you could sort of click on the format of an authenticity certificate. You can download it, make it your own, and print it out, sign it, send it to the collector. Next slide, please. Which then led us to the review chain, which was started by Radha. A few months into lockdown, a lot of grants and other opportunities were available to artists in India, but there is a bias that exists where, in fact, internationally too, all applications are required to be in English, whereas we're a multilingual country. And also as an artist myself, it's something that we're never taught. We're never taught how to apply to something, how to create your portfolio, project statement, all of that. And there's sort of these unwritten rules that already exist that or at least I have, through trial and error, learned about. So what Radha did here was to make them into resources and have them for you. Next slide, please. Things like, what is the difference between a CV and a bio? Or how to create your artist portfolios. So these resources are there on the website. Next slide, please. But as is the opportunities list, which is one of my favorite things, which is an Excel sheet that you can just download as an artist and edit as you like. But if you can see the bottom, it gives you these sheets according to months. And so it's according to deadline, which is how we work. We like doing everything last minute. And there are opportunities available to Indian artists around the world. So anything that you can apply to. Next slide, please. But putting ideas into action, we also decided to get various arts practitioners on board to do a 1-hour session with various artists. So the idea here was, again, no subjectivities. If you ask for help, you receive it. It was a sort of, what's it called? Like an open form. Everything was on first come, first serve basis. So if you just applied, in fact, the first time we had the review chain, there were 230 artists that applied, 12 reviewers that had come on board, and 80 artists that we were able to help. And the second review chain that was funded by Space Studio Baroda had 21 reviewers who came on board and 103 artists who we were able to help. So the idea here was that they get pre-application help. you just sign up, anything that you're working on, your portfolio, your CV, whatever that might be, you get to speak to various practitioners. And here we looked for practitioners, one, with diverse set of linguistic skills, and two, who have various disciplines within the arts that they work in. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah. And this is the Art Chain Legal. And with legal, we've started off, well, the idea here is for us as artists to be aware of our legal rights in this country very specifically, but also to know how to implement them. So we started off with copyright, how to put that copyright onto your emails. If, for example, if you're sending your designs, your ideas, or anything to anyone else, you can put a sentence, and that's all given to you on our website. But also, how do you protect yourself legally? What we're doing now, and we've also just received funding for this, which is to start working on legal contracts and explaining how legal contracts work in various ways and how to protect ourselves from the various types of exploitations that the generations above us and artists above us have already sort of encountered. So how to avoid that.
Wow. So there is like a robust way in which art in India has kind of uplifted and embedded itself in the artist community, especially over the last 2 years. Considering that I teach across multiple design and art universities, I've myself met multiple artists at different stages who've benefited from what the Art Chain India has done and is doing. In this way, specifically in terms of legal help, there are very, very few avenues, and creating an open format as they have has kind of equalized and democratized access to it, specifically considering they're now also translating in multiple languages as well, because India is a multilingual country and not just one speaking in English. Big thanks to the ISL team over here. Raise your hands, guys. All right. The touchiest topic. What was our angst to the pandemic? And we're not in a post-pandemic space, which is I put a question mark after post. We're still in it and looking at the masks on and off the stage. So, all right. All of us have contributed in some way to bring the arts ecosystem that we know more closer, aid it in some manner of interaction, especially after March 2020. I'd like to highlight here and ask my panelists here, what were the certain forms of interaction in building safer spaces? How did you re-engineer your support system, specifically towards virtual dependency, since everyone was also hooked on to screens even more? So next slide, please. I invite Kriti to kind of delve a bit deeper into this and start us off.
Okay. So, firstly, I just want to begin with, we have this idea that India is ready for online education.
Yes, we do.
And we're not. Okay, sorry to break it to you, but we're not. And secondly, there were lots of learning points. Personally, for me, it was very, very difficult to see this happen, because as educators, you want to go there and have a conversation and build a relation with the student. And when you begin it online, it's a blank screen. It's completely dark. You don't know who's on the other side at all, even if somebody is there on the other side. That's one case scenario. The second case scenario is also that a lot of homes just have one phone, maybe. And every day you cannot buy a data pack to be attending your classes. And other than that, different cities and different areas have their own problem. Internet being there, internet not being there. So we can say, okay, let's quickly go online, education's happening, let's do this. And for even the teachers, it's so difficult, because we just expect them to quickly just turn the way around.
Adapt.
Yeah, so quick. And nobody has any sort of empathy towards them. You create your lesson plans, you conduct them, you do everything, you take care of your household. You could be a person where there's a lot of domestic violence in your own house. Next morning, you have to go and turn on your computer, and you don't even know who's on the other screen, and even if the kids are dealing with it, there might be a child sitting in a corner and learning, and maybe the data pack's gone. And so the education has been restricted so much. So for the longest time, I personally did not want to go online because I could not relate to it, and I had extreme anxiety about it. So I was just creating modules after modules, and then I thought it's just never ending. When are we ever going to go back to the classroom? Maybe not. But I have been, touch wood, very lucky with the organizations that I work with. One of them who's been with me throughout has been Devi Art Foundation. And this was a program which we did with 3 schools, one in Pulwama, 2 schools in Delhi. And it was around puppetry and art education to understand each other. It was also art for well-being, not art just as pedagogy, but art for well-being, to understand what is happening at home, what really is like, our ideas of our future. Do we even think about our future? To understand what are the teachers trying to approach over here, what are they dealing with? So we had this whole program where we are actually working with students. We have a capacity building program for the educators, and then we're taking these programs to care homes. So over here, it was very interesting because the students in Pulwama would not speak initially in our program. And both the Delhi schools will be speaking a lot. And online, you just have to snatch your space. It's difficult to be the moderator and be like, okay, now you, now you, now you. Sometimes, you're just saying your screen is off and everything, so how do you implement it? But it was also important for us to tell them that when this screen time is over, you are going home, because you can have so many conversations over here and open up your heart, and then, but as you shut it, you're back to that same reality. So the safe space is just something so visual for you. So it's a learning curve for us, full of anxiety, full of learning things, but I won't say all bad things over here. We learn the most from our students all the time. The way they have shown courage, the way they have tried to learn about each other, even like, I don't know, we have slides after this?
Let's keep going. Yeah.
Yep. So, there were like lots of lessons that we did around finding your own identity, taking out, your house as a resource. Let's take out old images. Let's take out all the waste material. Let's collect them, show it. Let's find people who are sitting in your house, take their images. What are they feeling like? Let's make a super person. So like also the idea of gender, straight away cannot just be a first thing a child will be like Spider-Man, Batman, everything, But what is a super person? Then suddenly you ask them, who's your super person? Who do you go to when you feel bad? Everyone's like, Mama. They say, okay, but what are all these qualities which come about? So, something that is very relatable and human. So these are some of the avatars. He's like, I can see everyone who's sad, so I want to hug them all. One of the students like that. And this is an art woman. So she just splashes her colors, and they found all the newspapers and did all these things. And that, one of my students from Pulwama, very shy in the beginning, but whenever you would tell her to create something, she would be so happy to send us in and everything. We can go to the next slide. Then it was also the idea of, understanding our own stories. What impacts us? What is our, even through visual art stories as such, like what is like really like our fears? How can we overcome them collectively and everything? And we had an online exhibition with the kids, and I just have to give a shout out to my colleague Priya, who's also here. So we put it all together.
Thank you, Priya.
And also the objects they created to understand animals, through the animals, create animals, and also, put them in a place that you think they feel fear. So they started telling us about their own stories. I feel fear in this corner of the house. I really like this window. It opens up into something that I really see nicely. So, so there were like lots of conversations around all these things, and the idea is not to leave once you've started. So the idea is to go on and on and on, because these interventions are not just for us to show we've done a project. The intervention is actually to show that, we all are in this together in a real sense, and we will come out of it together. So.
Previous one, please.
So that's why I want to tell you about our anxiety story with land. And yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Totally, and in a lot of detail that we learned that you've adapted a lot. And we need to also bear in mind that it's not only the children that are adapting, because we're always worried about how they're educating themselves now. But the fact that art educators, teachers, or anyone in any capacity that's imparting any manner of information also has to adapt to this. I bring this back to Shilo to speak a bit more about how something like the Fearless Collective, couple of slides before, please. 2 slides before. How would the Fearless Collective adapt at a time when people were not also able to congregate as much over the last couple of years? But it was also extremely important to bring in all the spaces that made us also feel fear, actually. What a brilliant connection between the two of you. Yeah, go for it, Shilo.
So there was a viral article that went out during the pandemic. I don't know if you guys saw it, but 71% of India voted that being an artist was the least essential service during the pandemic. Do you see that?
Remember that? Yes, made us absolutely irrelevant and relevant in the same tone.
Which for me I found quite puzzling, because I mean in my own life I know that beauty saves me and it continues to save me, and if you take away all of the beauty, the poetry, the music, then what is life worth living for, really? So with Fearless, we found ourselves in an interesting position because, of course, there was a lot of fear over the last 2 years. Fear of being touched, fear of losing someone that you love, fear of being infected yourself, fear of losing your livelihood. I mean, we've been ridden with fears. And also there was a vocabulary around emotional health, trauma. So even people who would otherwise never even think about it were going to therapists, were using words like anxiety, depression, which I think in India was quite an awakening in its own way. So Fearless actually found ourselves in a position where a lot of the work that we were doing around working with communities on the margins and using art therapy-based techniques, using public representation, self-representation in public spaces, suddenly became more relevant than ever before. Having said that, we also didn't have access to the streets for many months on end. So like everybody else, we turned to Zoom calls for the first few months and found that it was actually completely counterintuitive to the work that we want to be doing. Zoom calls and the entire online space was extremely exclusive, inaccessible to most people that we normally engage with. And so as soon as lockdowns opened, we took to the streets again, essentially. We did a national tour, much to my mother's dismay, going from Jaipur to Lucknow to Delhi, and we worked with communities that were most affected by the pandemic. So we worked with the LGBTQ community in Jaipur, with Muslim women in Lucknow, and with Dalit and Muslim waste speakers in Delhi and in Bangalore. And it was also interesting to see sort of the intersectionalities there. The community of waste pickers in Delhi that we worked with, they have the most quote-unquote disposable lives in a sense. They all belong to Muslim and Dalit communities, and yet they provide some of the most essential services, not only through the pandemic, but also beyond the pandemic as well. So actually, waste picking and waste segregation wasn't made into an essential service over the last 2 years, and so these women were going out without any of the protections that essential workers had. And we ended up painting a huge image of a Dalit and a Muslim waste picker on the streets of Lodi colony as the Hathras protests were breaking out across the country, or actually being repressed across the country. And we found ourselves in a very weird position where suddenly aligning ourselves to Dalit movement or even painting an image of a Dalit woman on a wall somehow became into a political act simply because it became so politicized. So we ended up painting a huge image of a Dalit woman that says "My life matters" on Lodi colony, and it was also for us a radical act because I'm sure some of you have heard this. There used to be a kind of saying that even if a Dalit person's shadow fell on your wall, it was considered a truth, or it was considered impure. So for us to paint an image of this community, and when we do the work, it's not just about us going and painting with the community or painting the community. We actually take our women in our communities through processes of self-representation where they choose who they want to be rather than who they're told to be. And our images are often portals to a world that doesn't even exist yet. You know, perhaps an image of a Sri Lankan domestic migrant worker sitting in the streets of Lebanon is not a world that exists in the way that it should, but we create visions of that safe and sacred future that we want to inhabit.
Thank you, Shilo. Next slide, please. And the next. This was one of my main questions, and I'm going to combine the last two for Aravani and Art Chain. What happens after you create a community? Because we look at ways in which the organization can run smooth, especially when it is driven by volunteerism. How would you keep your community engaged? And most importantly, how would you balance seeking projects or funding, or balance your vision and credibility? How do these really heavy words make their way into your daily? Aravani, and then Art Chain.
As confusing as that question is how every day is. I think it's important not to focus so much on. I've always believed, or I think Aravani developed in such a way that we did not have a mission or a vision, and it was a very questionable act at that point of time because everybody we were meeting were like, oh, but is it an organization? What is it? And what are you doing with it? And I think and all of us in the collective were okay not to answer any of it, simply put. Also, not feeling pressurized by it, not feeling the pressure to be somewhere and do something all the time, or to prove something to somebody. We wanted to work together, to stay together, to build that movement together. That was our focus, and we did that. We made sure we spent enough time with the community, with the people, and all our friends right now who will do any project anywhere now. That was more important. Building the trust, building a friendship was far more important than a mission or a vision or I don't know whatever else, because it didn't even make sense to the people who are working with us. So who is it for? Is it only for the outside world? Is it only for us to talk to people? Because that's anyway something we were not keen on doing. We've tried to stay clear of all of that for a very long time. And consciously, Sadhna and me make sure that we are not the face of the project, because the project belongs to them. And it rightly said, they are supposed to be here as much as we all are. So I think at any given point of time, that is our answer to most of the things that were put forth to us, because we were letting them answer these questions, and that was making more sense, and it became more powerful because they were actually figuring out their own answers and their own identity in the project or in the public space or in the art world, rightly said, by themselves. So, and I think we were just there to navigate that, or to help people, language it in a better way, because people are apprehensive about talking to them directly or not knowing what to address them as and things like that. And I think art was easier in a way, like the platform for them to have that conversation. It was never personal. It was more about their journeys and why did they choose art. And, the conversations became more organic rather than focusing on, oh, what gender are you? What happened? When did you run away from home? I know people have asked these questions time and time again. We all know that. And it was really nice to see the break, how people were breaking themselves also to have the conversation, because it was nice that people were also making an effort to learn. People were also, because it has to happen two-way. I think the community and the people from the trans community have done a lot, and I think we've still not paid attention to that. And I don't think it's their responsibility to constantly sensitize us, or their responsibility to constantly tell us how they should be treated. We should learn it as well. So I think that has been driving us even through our art projects or whatever we are doing. More so because it's a conversation we have with them every day. We meet them every single day. So it's a different relationship we all share together as well.
I think, like Poornima mentioned, we didn't intend to start a movement at all. I still don't know. We get asked this question of what intersectionality means to us or what feminism means to us, and I personally still don't know what it does. But we are living by what we are doing. We didn't intend to start anything when we decided to work with them. They became friends, and we enjoyed working together. And we used to do that on the ground. And then we used to be asked this question by journalists or whoever came, and how does it feel to be working with the community? Or how does it feel that we're really inclusive? And it felt really strange because we were not intending to do anything or make, we were just being. And so these questions felt really new even to me. So it was very interesting for me to see how the community felt about this as well, and how they felt being in an open space, and how they felt reacting to this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In fact, it's always important to be reminded of the privileges we have as we're sitting here on this stage, and the fact, and those that aren't, And I understand absolutely that when it comes to minority communities within the stratification of the society that we occupy, it's always the majority's responsibility, never the minority's responsibility. So thank you for making that point through. I request the next slide change, and Ayesha, as you answer, one of the next few parts also to add into your answer would be the pitfalls that we can avoid. What else have you learned and the challenges that you faced? And from Ayesha, it comes back to Kriti. So Ayesha, go for it.
Okay, a few things. So I'll start with we're here for the people who need us, in a way that the alternative marketplace on Instagram, it exists for as long as the participating artists want to engage with it. And in fact, we're opening the market price that we had earlier set, and that was 2 years back now, so that everyone can price as and what they like. In fact, it's really nice to see so many artists who had first put their work up on the art chain now at the art fair and at
Absolutely.
collateral events. It's wild. And maybe they don't use the art chain in the way that they did earlier. Maybe they use it for other parts of their practice, or maybe we have a new group of artists who come and use it as they'd like. But the idea is that the agency is in us as artists, it's in our hands, and that that artists demand whatever they want from us, and that's what we're here for. When it comes to pitfalls, but even what you were speaking about, a definition is something that we've also stayed away from. So we're not an institution, we're not a foundation, we're not, we wouldn't even say a community in that way, that we don't sort of adhere to older connotations or ideas that this might already have in the past, but are here for whatever is needed at that present moment. And so it kind of allows us this fluidity and allows the artist the fluidity too. It's an open market, you can enter and exit as you like. Just like that, for us, we have the fluidity to keep changing and spilling and doing various things and expanding ourselves for various decisions, but keeping our core values intact. So if you even saw our screenshots would have been of what you first see when you go on Instagram. Or the screenshot of the reviewers they were alphabetically put onto the website, and so it was just the first page that you would see when you go on the website. So the idea here is not to have any subjectivity. And so even if, let's say, tomorrow we do another iteration of a review chain and there are 5 reviewers that come on board and they say, okay, we can do 20 reviews, but 200 applicants, we will still only have the first 20 people who will receive that review, because we're not going to play into any subjectivity at all. So our core values in that way remain the same, but what we become or what we decide to be tomorrow might not be what we are today, and that's totally okay. But it also allows for mistakes. It also allows for experimentation. It allows for failure, and I think that's really important.
We're also within the last 5 minutes of our conversation. I request for the next video to be played, and while that is playing, that's the next slide, please. While that is playing, the audience, please think of the questions you'd like to ask us, because we have 2 more videos to go, a minute each, and then I'm coming back to all of y'all. You can play this, please.
We were given a unique opportunity to work with the first batch of SOSE PVA children in 2021. This journey into the visual arts provided by us gave an insight and understanding of the aspirations and ambitions of the learners, teachers, the school, and the Department of Education, Government of Delhi. Our learners come from very varied backgrounds with different language abilities, aptitudes, and aspirations. Our approach in these initial interactions with the learners has been to immerse these young minds in the many forms of visual arts through an introduction of varied artists, mediums, and concepts from India and the world, like Bhuribai, Ragmala paintings, Patachitra, Yayoi Kusama, Amrita Shergill, Gauri Gill, Chow art, street art from Delhi, and and international districts. Our program inspired students to produce artistic expressions that were creatively and critically executed on themes such as emotions, rhythms of life, community and heritage, identity and environment. The program had amazing results as it inspired high motivational and receptivity levels in the students who expressed their desire to pursue this program further. The SOSC is a unique proposition for 14 to 18-year-olds with talent and interest to understand and pursue visual arts. We have developed a unique approach and outlook that is specific to the age group of 14 to 18 based on their dreams and talents. In our experience, we witnessed and have been inspired by the potential of the young artists at SOSC PVA. We sincerely believe that these are the stepping stones in building independent and sustainable careers of our students in the many industries allied with visual arts.
Can we also just have the last slide, which has our last video, and I'm going to request everybody to be prepared for their closing comments and answering questions from our audience. This is the last video, which is from Aravani. Yep, right there. Thank you.
ಕೆಲವು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ ಜನ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬದಲಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಅಥವಾ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಜನ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಸೊಸೈಟಿ ಏನ್ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ಕೊಂತ ಇತ್ತಂದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ಬರೀ ಸೆಕ್ಸ್ ವರ್ಕು ಅಥವಾ ಬೆಗ್ಗಿಂಗ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಸೀಮಿತ ಅಂತ.
ಹಿಂದೆ ಸುಮಾರು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಮಂಗಳಮುಖಿಯರು ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಇವಾಗಲೂ ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಹಿಂದೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನಂತ ಕೆಲಸ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಬಿಲ್ಕುಲ್. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸೆಕ್ಸ್ ಒಂದು ಬೆಗ್ಗಿಂಗ್ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಇತ್ತು. ಇವಾಗ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಮಂಗಳಮುಖಿಯರೆಲ್ಲ ಎಜುಕೇಷನ್ ಇದೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಹಾಗೆ ಕಲೆ, ಚಿತ್ರಕಲಾ ಪ್ರತಿಭೆ, ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅವ್ರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ಏನು ಹೇಳಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರು?
ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಂಥರ ತಿರಸ್ಕಾರ, ಕೇರ್ಲೆಸ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಬದುಕಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಬದುಕಲು ಬಿಡಿ ಅಂತ
ನೋಡಿ. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳೆ ಇದೆ, ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಲಿ, ನಮಗೂ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಇದೆ, ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ತಯಾರಾಗಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ನಮಗೂ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡ್ರಿ.
Thank you so much.